It was one of those evenings when silence feels heavier than words. The kind of silence that sits in the corner of a lonely room, waiting for someone to break it. The clock ticked, the wind moved the curtains slightly, and still I sat there, staring at the half-empty cup of tea on my table. I hadn't heard from my daughter, Emily, in almost 3 weeks. For most people, that might not mean much. But for me, her father, who had raised her alone after her mother passed, it felt like an ache I couldn't shake off. She used to call me every Sunday. No matter how busy she was, no matter where she was, "Hi, Dad, just checking on you," she'd say. Those small words meant everything. They filled my house with warmth. But now, only silence answered my days. At first, I told myself she must be busy work, friends. Maybe life had simply caught up with her. But deep down, a father always knows when something isn't right. The tone of her last message still echoed in my mind, rushed, distant, like she was trying to hide something. So that evening, I decided to visit her. No phone calls, no warning, just an old man showing up at his daughter's door. I told myself it was just to surprise her, to see her smile again. But a part of me, the quiet, uneasy part, wanted to know why my daughter suddenly felt like a stranger. I grabbed my coat, locked the door, and stepped out into the cool night. The air smelled faintly of rain. The streetlights flickered, painting the road in pale gold. My steps echoed in the stillness as I walked toward her apartment building a few blocks away. She'd moved there after her marriage fell apart, saying she wanted a fresh start. I supported her, of course. That's what fathers do. But tonight, as I reached the building, I couldn't help but feel like I was walking toward something I wasn't ready to face. When I reached her floor, I paused outside her door, apartment 4B. There it was, familiar yet distant. I could hear faint sounds inside, but not voices. I raised my hand and knocked. Once. Twice. For a moment, nothing. Then footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. The door opened slightly, and there she was. Emily. My daughter. Her eyes widened in surprise, but not the kind of surprise that comes from joy. More like fear. Her smile was small. Forced. The kind you give when you're not sure what to say. "Dad, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice soft, almost trembling. I smiled, trying to keep things light. "Can a father come see his daughter?" I said. "I brought some of your favorite cookies. Thought you might like them." She laughed weakly, avoiding my eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she murmured, glancing over her shoulder into the apartment. Something about that glance made me pause. It wasn't casual, it was nervous. Like she didn't want me to see what was behind that door. "Are you going to let me in?" I asked gently. "Oh, it's a bit messy inside," she said quickly, stepping slightly in front of the doorway as if to block my view. "I wasn't expecting anyone." I nodded slowly. "That's all right, I just wanted to see you for a bit." She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the doorknob. Then she stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "Let's talk here," she said with a small, uneasy smile. That was when I knew something was wrong. My daughter, who once couldn't wait to show me her new decorations, her cooking, her paintings, now refused to let me even peek inside her home. I tried to ignore the unease twisting in my chest. Maybe she was embarrassed about the mess. Maybe she was just tired. But then I noticed something else, a faint bruise on her wrist, half covered by her sleeve. My heart sank. "Emily, what happened there?" She froze for a second, then quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Oh, that? I hit it on the cabinet," she said too fast, too rehearsed. I'd been a father too long to believe that kind of lie. But I didn't push. I just nodded and handed her the cookies. "Here," I said. "You used to love these." She took them with a shaky smile. "Thanks, Dad. I really missed you." "You don't call much anymore," I said quietly. Her smile faded. "I've just been busy. Work's been crazy. You know how it is." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to pretend that everything was fine. But her eyes told a different story, eyes that once sparkled with laughter now looked tired, dimmed, and guarded. I reached out and gently held her hand. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. You know that, right?" She nodded quickly. "Everything's fine, really. I promise." Before I could say more, a sound came from behind the door, a muffled thud, like someone dropping something heavy. Her body tensed instantly. She turned her head toward the door, then back to me, forcing another smile. "Dad, I should go now. I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" "Emily." "Please," she said, her voice suddenly sharp, almost pleading. "Tomorrow." I stared at her, my chest tightening with confusion and worry. Then, reluctantly, I nodded. "All right, tomorrow." She leaned forward, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "I love you, Dad." But even those words felt like a curtain soft but hiding something behind it. As I turned to leave, I glanced at the door again. For just a second, I thought I saw movement through the small gap between the curtains, a shadow shifting inside. Someone else was there, watching. I walked down the hall, my mind spinning. Maybe it was a friend. Maybe she had company. But the way she acted, the fear in her eyes, the tension in her voice, it wasn't normal. I reached the stairs, about to go down, when I heard a quiet voice behind me. "Sir," I turned. Standing near the neighboring door was an older man, maybe in his 70s. Thin, gray hair, kind eyes behind glasses. He looked at me with hesitation, then said softly, "You're Emily's father, aren't you?" "Yes," I said slowly. "I'm Daniel." He nodded. "Name's Mr. Collins. I live next door." "Nice to meet you," I said, though my voice was distant. Something about the way he looked at me, almost apologetic, made me uneasy. "Everything all right?" He glanced at Emily's door, then back at me. His voice dropped. "If I were you, I'd give her some space tonight." I frowned. "Why do you say that?" He hesitated, his gaze darkening slightly. "Just trust me, sir. Not everything is what it looks like." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Do you know something?" I asked. He shook his head. "I know enough to say you should be careful." Then, after a pause, he added quietly, "Sometimes, love makes us blind to the things we don't want to see." Before I could respond, he turned and went back into his apartment, closing the door behind him. I stood there, frozen, my heart beating fast. His words echoed in my mind like thunder. Not everything is what it looks like. What was he talking about? What did he know about my daughter that I didn't? I went home that night, but I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker outside, my mind replaying every small detail, her nervous smile, the bruise, the shadow, the sound behind the door. The pieces didn't fit. Emily wasn't the type to lie. Not to me, not ever. The clock ticked past midnight, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Mr. Collins said. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing. But a father's instincts aren't easily fooled. Something was happening behind that door, something my daughter was too afraid to tell me. I poured myself another cup of tea, hands trembling slightly. The rain started outside, soft at first, then steady. The sound filled the silence of my house. I stared into the cup, seeing my reflection ripple in the surface, and whispered to myself, "What are you hiding, Emily?" That night, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would go back. Not as a visitor. Not as a father dropping by with cookies, but as a man who needed to know the truth no matter how much it hurt. Because sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. And my daughter's silence was screaming. That night felt endless. I barely slept, haunted by the image of Emily's eyes, that flicker of fear she tried so hard to hide. When morning came, I sat in my kitchen staring at the cold cup of tea I'd poured hours ago. My house felt emptier than ever. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound, steady and merciless, marking each second of my uncertainty. I tried to convince myself that maybe Mr. Collins was mistaken. Maybe Emily really was fine. Maybe I'd imagined the bruise. But the unease wouldn't leave. It settled deep in my chest, heavy and cold. A father knows when something's wrong with his child. And something was terribly wrong. By afternoon, I couldn't sit still any longer. I put on my coat again and headed back to her building. The day was overcast, clouds hanging low, and the air smelled like rain. Every step I took toward her apartment felt heavier, like my legs were dragging me toward something I wasn't ready to see. When I reached her floor, I noticed her door was slightly open, just a crack, enough for a sliver of light to spill into the hallway. My heart started pounding. I hesitated, debating whether to knock or call out, when a voice behind me said quietly, "She's not home." I turned to see Mr. Collins standing at his door again. He was wearing a worn cardigan, holding a mug of coffee in one hand. His expression was calm but serious. "She left early," he said, taking a sip. "Didn't look well." I frowned. "Not well? What do you mean?" He looked past me, his voice low. "She seemed upset. And there was shouting last night. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to hear." "Shouting?" The word hit me like a slap. He nodded slowly. "A man's voice, rough, angry. It went on for a while. Then silence. I felt my chest tighten. There's someone living with her?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know for sure, but I've seen a man visit often, usually late. He doesn't stay long in the mornings. Tall, maybe in his 30s, always looks around before entering. Not the kind of man who makes you feel at ease." I gripped the railing, trying to steady myself. "Why didn't she tell me?" Mr. Collins looked at me gently. "Sometimes people hide pain because they think it will protect the ones they love, especially from family." I nodded, unable to respond. My throat felt dry. I thanked him quietly, then turned back toward Emily's door. I wanted to knock to demand answers, but she wasn't there. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small piece of paper and slid it under her door. I wrote only a few words. "Emily, I'm worried about you. Please call me." That evening, I waited for her call. None came. The next day passed the same way. Then another. Each night I stared at my phone, hoping to see her name light up the screen. Nothing. On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to wait outside her building. If she wouldn't talk to me, I'd wait until I could catch her myself. I arrived just before dusk, sitting on the bench across the street. People came and went, neighbors, delivery men, young couples laughing, but no sign of Emily. It was around 8 when I finally saw her. She was walking quickly toward the entrance, head down, clutching her bag close to her chest. I called out her name, but she didn't hear me. Or maybe she pretended not to. I stood and started walking toward her. "Emily!" She stopped abruptly, shoulders stiffening. Slowly, she turned around. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to something else, frustration, maybe even fear. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I've been trying to reach you," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You haven't answered my calls." She sighed heavily, glancing around nervously. "I've been busy." "I told you." "Busy with what?" "You don't look well. You look tired, pale." She forced a laugh. "You're worrying too much again." "Emily, don't lie to me," I said quietly, "but please. If you're in trouble." Her eyes darted to the entrance door, and she cut me off. "Not here. I can't talk here." "Then let's go inside." "No," she said sharply. "Not now." Her tone startled me. She had never spoken to me like that before. The words were hard, defensive. I could see her trembling slightly, like she was caught between wanting to speak and being terrified to. "I'm your father," I said gently. "You can tell me anything." She opened her mouth as if to say something, then stopped. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "Dad, please." "Just go home. I'll explain everything later." "When, Emily, when?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked behind me and her face went pale. I turned around. A man was walking toward us from across the street, tall, muscular, wearing a dark jacket. His eyes were cold, hard. He didn't look at me, only at her. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone flat, but his gaze was sharp, like he was assessing a threat. Emily forced a smile. "Yes, everything's fine." He nodded slowly, then looked at me. "You must be her father." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Daniel." He extended a hand. His grip was strong, too strong, as if he wanted to prove something. "I'm Mark," he said curtly. Mark. The name hit me like a stone. I'd never heard of him before. He turned back to Emily. "We should go. You're late." She nodded quickly, not meeting my eyes. "Dad, I'll call you, okay? Please, just go home for now." I stared at her, feeling helpless. "Emily," but she was already walking away with him. I watched as they disappeared into the building. For a moment, I just stood there, my heart sinking deeper with every step they took away from me. That night, I couldn't shake his face from my mind, the coldness in his eyes, the way Emily seemed small beside him. Something about him felt wrong, dangerous. The next morning, I returned to her building. I told myself I was just passing by, but I knew that wasn't true. I needed to see her again to understand what was happening. I waited in the hallway for hours. Finally, around noon, the door to her apartment opened. It wasn't Emily who stepped out. It was Mark. He locked the door behind him and walked down the hall without noticing me. I saw him up close this time, expensive watch, rough hands, a faint scar near his neck. He walked like someone who wasn't afraid of much. When he left, I approached Emily's door and knocked softly. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when the door next to me opened slightly. Mr. Collins again. "Mr. Daniel," he said quietly, "you shouldn't come here today." "Why?" I asked, my voice strained. He hesitated, then whispered, "That man, Mark, he's not who you think. I've seen how he treats her. Please, just be careful." "What do you mean?" He looked down. "I've heard things, shouting, crying, sometimes crashes. And once I saw her outside with a bruise near her collarbone." My stomach twisted. I clenched my fists, struggling to stay calm. "Why hasn't she told me?" "Fear," he said simply. "People like him make you believe you can't tell anyone." I felt rage rising in my chest, hot and blinding. "If he's hurting her, I'll—" Mr. Collins gently touched my arm. "Please, not now. You can't just barge in. You need proof. You need to be smart about this." He was right. As much as I wanted to kick that door open and drag her away, I knew it would only make things worse for her. I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. "Thank you," I said quietly. He gave me a sad smile. "I have a daughter too. I know what it feels like to see them in pain." I left the building that day with a storm raging inside me. Fear, anger, helplessness. But under it all was one unshakable thought: I wouldn't let my daughter go through this alone. Not again. Not while I was still breathing. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the empty chair across from me, the one where she used to sit as a child, swinging her legs while telling me about her day. My little girl. What had happened to that bright, fearless girl? As the rain began to fall again, I made a silent promise. I would find out the truth about Mark, about what he was doing to her. And when I did, I would make sure he never had the chance to hurt her again. Because a father's love isn't just about raising his child. It's about protecting them even when they're too scared to ask for help. The next few days dragged by like an endless gray fog. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, the trembling smile, the way she looked past me instead of at me, her hand clutching her bag like it was armor. Something inside me told me that if I didn't act soon, I'd lose her completely. On the third morning, I decided to visit again. I wasn't sure what I'd do, but I couldn't sit at home any longer, pretending that everything was fine. As I walked up the narrow hallway of her building, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves knew something I didn't. I reached her door and paused. The sound of faint music came from inside, but it wasn't cheerful, just a low hum, like static. I knocked gently, no answer. I waited a few seconds, then knocked again. "Emily?" I called softly. "It's Dad." The door didn't move. I pressed my ear against it, listening. For a few moments I heard nothing. Then, faintly, a shuffle. A quiet, nervous movement like someone walking barefoot on the carpet. I knocked once more. "Emily, please. Just talk to me." Suddenly, a door behind me creaked open. I turned to see Mr. Collins standing there again. His expression was tense, and he quickly motioned for me to come closer. "Not now," he whispered. "He's inside." "Mark?" I asked. He nodded. He came back late last night. I heard them arguing. It was bad. A chill ran through me. "Did he hurt her?" "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling slightly. But I heard something fall. Then silence. I felt my stomach twist. Why hasn't anyone called the police? He sighed, glancing nervously at the other doors. "People are scared. That man, he's not just loud. He's dangerous. And Emily, she always defends him afterward. Says it's fine, says she slipped or it was her fault." I clenched my fists, anger burning through the fear. "That's what abusers make you believe," I muttered. Mr. Collins looked at me sadly. "You're a good father, Mr. Daniel, but you need to be careful. If you go in there now, you'll only make things worse for her." I didn't want to hear it. Every instinct in me screamed to break down that door and drag her out of there. But I knew he was right. Mark seemed like the kind of man who thrived on power. If I confronted him now, Emily would pay the price later. I nodded reluctantly. Then what do I do? He looked down the hall, then back at me. There's something you should see. He motioned for me to follow him into his apartment. Inside, the place was small but neat, filled with books and framed photographs. He led me to the window facing the back alley. From here, he said quietly, you can see her kitchen window. I don't spy on her, but sometimes I worry, especially at night. I stepped closer to the glass. Her kitchen window was visible, though dim behind the curtains. I noticed the faint movement of shadows, 2 figures, Emily's slim outline, and a taller one pacing back and forth. Even from a distance, I could sense the tension in the air. Then, suddenly, the taller figure slammed something down on the counter. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Emily flinch. Her hand went to her arm, then she slowly backed away, head lowered. I gripped the window ledge so hard my knuckles went white. He's hurting her, I said through my teeth. Mr. Collins placed a hand on my shoulder. You can't just go in there. Not yet, you need to collect proof. Otherwise, he'll twist the story against you or her. Proof. The word echoed in my mind. It wasn't enough to feel it, I needed evidence. Something solid. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat at my kitchen table, the same place I'd shared so many dinners with Emily when she was little. I could almost hear her laughter echoing through the empty house. Dad, when I grow up, I'll take care of you, she used to say. You won't ever have to be lonely. I smiled bitterly. I don't need you to take care of me, I used to reply. Just promise you'll be happy. Now she wasn't either. The next day, I returned to her neighborhood early in the morning. The streets were quiet except for a few joggers and a milk delivery van. I bought a cup of coffee from a small shop near her building and waited outside, pretending to read the newspaper. Around 9, I saw Mark leave the building. He was wearing sunglasses and a leather jacket, talking loudly on his phone as he walked to a black car parked nearby. He looked confident, smug like a man who thought he controlled everything around him. Once he drove off, I waited a few minutes before crossing the street and heading inside. My hands trembled as I climbed the stairs. I didn't have a plan, only hope that Emily would finally let me in. I knocked softly. Emily, it's Dad. He's gone. Please open up. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, the door creaked open a few inches. Her face appeared in the gap, pale, eyes red from crying. Dad, she whispered, glancing nervously behind her. You shouldn't be here. I just need to see you, I said gently. Please, just for a few minutes. She hesitated, then stepped aside. I entered quietly. The apartment was dim, curtains drawn tight. There was a faint smell of alcohol and something burned, maybe food left too long on the stove. The once cozy space looked like a stranger's home now. A cracked vase lay near the table. A framed photo of us from her college graduation was face down on the shelf. I turned to her. Emily, what's going on? She bit her lip. It's complicated. No, it's not, I said, my voice breaking. Someone is hurting you. I can see it in your eyes. Tears welled up again, but she shook her head. You don't understand, Dad. Mark, he's just going through a hard time. He's stressed. He didn't mean what? I asked sharply. Didn't mean to yell at you? Didn't mean to hit you? She froze, her lips trembling. Then she whispered, Please, don't make it worse. I felt my chest tighten. Emily, no one should ever make you live like this. You don't have to protect him. She shook her head violently. You don't know him like I do. He loves me. He just loses control sometimes. I wanted to scream, to tell her love doesn't hurt, but she looked so fragile that I couldn't. Instead, I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Sweetheart, if you ever need me, call. Day or night. No questions asked. She nodded weakly, wiping her tears. I promise. I stayed only a few minutes longer before leaving. My hands shook as I closed the door behind me. I'd seen the truth with my own eyes. She was trapped, scared, and too broken to admit it. As I walked down the hall, Mr. Collins' door opened slightly again. His expression was grim. How bad? He asked quietly. Worse than I thought, I replied. He nodded slowly, then said, I think I can help you. That evening, he came by my house. He brought a small notepad filled with notes and dates. "I've been keeping track," he said. "Every time I hear shouting, every time I see him leave in a rage, every time she's hurt." I didn't know what to do before, but now, maybe this can help you. I stared at the notepad in disbelief. "You've been doing this all along?" He nodded. I couldn't just stand by, but I needed someone to trust. Now, maybe we can make sure she's safe. That night, as I read through the pages, I realized how deep this had gone. Weeks of arguments. Nights when neighbors heard crashes and screams. Times when Emily hadn't left her apartment for days. I felt both gratitude and shame. Gratitude that someone had been watching out for her when I couldn't, and shame that I'd been too blind, too distant to notice the signs sooner. I closed the notepad and stared at the wall, whispering to myself, "She won't live like this anymore. I won't let her." But before I could act, something unexpected happened. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was silence at first. Then a trembling voice. "Dad, it's me." My heart skipped. "Emily? What's wrong?" Her breathing was shaky. "I need to see you. But not at my place. Somewhere else." "Of course," I said quickly. "Anywhere. Just tell me where." She hesitated, then whispered, "The cafe near the park. Noon." Then she hung up. I sat there for a moment, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Something in her voice, the urgency, the fear, told me this meeting wouldn't just be about words. It would be the beginning of something much bigger, and perhaps finally the truth I'd been waiting to hear. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was waiting behind that door, Emily's door. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face again. That trembling, fragile look, as if she were standing on the edge of something she couldn't escape. Her call from yesterday still echoed in my ears. The cafe meeting had ended abruptly. She hadn't told me everything I could feel it. There was something more she was hiding, something she was afraid even to say out loud. That night, the unease grew unbearable. I found myself driving to her apartment again. The streets were quiet, bathed in that eerie orange glow from the streetlights. My mind kept repeating the same thought. What if I'm already too late? When I reached her building, I saw that one light in her apartment was still on the kitchen window. The curtains weren't fully drawn this time, and I caught the faint shadow of someone pacing. But it didn't look like Emily. It was taller, broader. The movement was sharp, impatient. I parked across the street and waited. My pulse hammered in my ears. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the front door opened. Mark stepped out, locking it behind him. He wore a long coat and moved with a strange kind of confidence, like someone who believed no one would ever dare question him. He got into his car and drove off, tires screeching. I stared at the building. The light was still on, and then something inside me snapped. I couldn't just stand there anymore. I had to know what was happening. I walked up the steps, my heart pounding with every step. The hallway was quiet except for the low hum of the building's heating system. I stopped in front of her door, hesitating only for a second before knocking softly. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Emily, it's Dad. Please open up." Still nothing. The silence on the other side made my chest tighten. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. And then I heard it, the faintest sound, like a whimper. A quiet, broken sob. That was all it took. "Emily!" I shouted, jiggling the handle. Locked. "Emily, I'm coming in." Just as I was about to try breaking the lock, a hand grabbed my arm from behind. "Don't," a voice hissed. I turned sharply. It was Mr. Collins again, his face pale, eyes wide with worry. "Mr. Daniel, please," he said quickly. "You'll only make things worse. I've called someone. The police are on their way." "The police?" I gasped. He nodded. "I called after hearing shouting earlier. It went on for almost an hour, then stopped suddenly. I was about to check when you came." I stared at the door again, panic clawing at my chest. "She's in there, isn't she?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with that pained, knowing expression. Minutes crawled by, though they felt like hours. Then, finally, 2 officers arrived. I explained everything: the fights, the bruises, the fear, the silence. They knocked and called her name, but still no response. Finally, they forced the lock. The door swung open with a crack that echoed through the hall. The apartment looked worse than before. A chair was overturned, a plate shattered near the counter. There was a faint smell of alcohol mixed with something bitter fear, maybe. "Emily?" I called out, stepping inside. The officers moved cautiously, checking each room. I followed, my breath shallow. Then one of them stopped near the bedroom door. "Sir," he said quietly, "please wait here." My heart stopped, but before I could obey, I heard her voice, weak, trembling. "Dad!" I pushed past the officer and saw her sitting on the floor near the bed, knees pulled to her chest. Her hair was a mess, her face pale. She looked exhausted, terrified. "Emily!" I rushed to her, dropping to my knees. "Oh, sweetheart." She flinched when I touched her arm, then slowly relaxed as she realized it was me. "He's gone," she whispered. "He said he'd be back later." I swallowed hard, anger burning through the fear. "He's not coming back here." "Not again." One of the officers spoke gently. "Ma'am, do you want to file a report?" Emily looked down. I don't know." "Yes, you do," I said firmly. "He hurt you. You can't keep protecting him." Tears welled in her eyes. "If I do, he'll hate me. He said he'd ruin my life." "Sweetheart," I whispered, "he already has. But you can take it back. You can end this." After a long pause, she nodded faintly. "Okay." The officers took her statement that night. I stayed beside her the whole time, holding her hand, trying to give her the strength she'd forgotten she had. When they finally left, Emily turned to me, voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't want you to see me like this." "There's nothing to be ashamed of," I said softly. "You didn't deserve any of this." She looked away. I thought if I loved him enough, he'd change. But every time I tried, it only made him worse. "That's not love," I said. "That's control. And now you're free." She nodded slowly, though the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe it yet. I stayed the night on her couch just to be sure she wasn't alone. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, something didn't feel right. Mr. Collins had said he called the police after hearing shouting, but that meant he'd heard something before I arrived. What had really happened before I got there? And where had Mark gone? The next morning, I stepped outside to get some air. The sun was rising, casting a soft gold light over the quiet street. Mr. Collins was waiting by the door, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Long night," he said gently, handing me one. "Thank you," I murmured. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He smiled faintly. "You're a father. You would have done exactly what you did, whatever it took." I took a sip, then asked, "You said you heard shouting before the police came. Did you hear what they said?" He hesitated, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard him accuse her of lying to him. Something about money. He said she'd been hiding something. "Hiding what?" "I don't know," he said quietly. But she kept saying, "It's not like that, I swear." Then he yelled something about a phone call, and I heard something break. A cold realization crept into my chest. Money. Phone call. What could he have meant? When I went back inside, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. Her hands were shaking. "Emily," I said softly, sitting across from her. "What did he mean last night about hiding something?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to tell you. Or him, but he found out anyway." "Tell me what?" She took a deep breath. "I've been trying to leave him for months. I was saving money secretly a little from my job every week. I thought if I could get enough, I could move out, start over. But he found the account." I felt both relief and fury. Relief that she'd finally tried to escape, fury that he'd found a way to punish her for it. "You don't need to hide anymore," I said firmly. "We'll fix this. I'll help you. You'll never have to see him again." But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. People like Mark didn't just disappear quietly. Later that day, as I was leaving to grab groceries, I noticed something strange. Across the street, a black car was parked the same one Mark drove. It hadn't been there earlier, and as I walked past it, I felt the faintest sense of being watched. Someone was sitting inside. I couldn't see his face clearly through the tinted glass, but I didn't have to. I could feel it, that same smug arrogance radiating even through the window. I kept walking, pretending not to notice, but my stomach twisted. When I got back to the apartment, I looked out the window again. The car was gone. That night, Emily and I ate dinner in silence. She was quieter than usual, her mind clearly elsewhere. Every creak, every noise from the hallway made her flinch. Finally, she whispered, "He's not done, Dad. I know him. He'll come back." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we'll be ready." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to sound strong, certain, protective, the father who could fix everything. But as the wind rattled the window and the night deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that what lay behind that door, the door of Emily's apartment, her heart, her silence, wasn't over. There were still secrets hiding there, and the truth had only just begun to show its face. That night felt heavier than any before it. The air itself seemed to pulse with dread, the kind that sits in your bones and refuses to leave. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch, exhaustion finally dragging her under after days of tears and fear. I sat nearby, unable to close my eyes. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, each second reminding me that time was running out, though for what, I didn't know yet. Outside, the world was asleep. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it again, that same uneasy presence I'd felt before. Every time the wind shifted or the pipes groaned, I flinched. The curtains swayed slightly in the breeze coming through the cracked window. That's when I noticed it, the faint glimmer of headlights far across the street. The black car was back. My stomach turned cold. I stood slowly, careful not to wake Emily, and peeked through the edge of the curtain. The car's engine was off, but its silhouette was unmistakable. Someone was sitting inside, watching, waiting. I picked up my phone, debating whether to call the police again. But what would I say? My daughter's abusive husband might be watching from his car. They'd need proof, and Mark had a way of making himself look innocent. So instead, I did what any father would do. I stayed up, guarding her. Hours passed. The clock struck 2, then 3. The car didn't move. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but I couldn't rest. Not yet. Then, just before dawn, I saw the car door open. A figure stepped out tall, wearing a dark jacket, moving quietly toward the building. Mark. Every muscle in my body tensed. He wasn't just here to talk. The way he moved, low, deliberate, silent, told me everything. I rushed to the door and locked it, then went to Emily, shaking her awake. "Emily, get up," I whispered urgently. "He's here." Her eyes shot open instantly. "What?" No, he wouldn't. "He's outside," I said firmly. "Stay here." I moved toward the hallway just as the sound of footsteps echoed from the other side of the door. Then a soft knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. "Emily," Mark's voice came, calm, almost pleasant. "I know you're in there." Emily froze, her face drained of color. "Dad," she whispered, "he promised he'd leave me alone." "Promises don't mean anything to a man like him," I muttered. The knocks came again, louder this time. "Open the door, Emily, we need to talk." "I just want to talk." I felt something in me snap. "No," I said loudly, standing by the door. "She doesn't want to see you. Leave." There was a pause, then a dark chuckle. So the old man finally speaks up. My fists clenched. "You're trespassing, Mark," I said coldly. "The police have your statement. You come near her again and they'll arrest you." He laughed again, low and mocking. "Police? They don't care about some little domestic spat. She's my wife. You can't keep me from her. She's not your property," I shot back. "Get off this floor before I—" A sudden hard bang on the door cut me off. Emily screamed. Mark slammed his fist against the wood again. "You think you can take my wife away from me, old man? You think you can hide her?" The anger in his voice wasn't just rage, it was desperation. He was unraveling. I grabbed my phone. "I'm calling the police." He laughed one last time, a harsh, ugly sound. "Do it, but you'll regret it." Then silence. The sound of his footsteps retreating down the hall was almost worse than his voice. I kept the phone in my hand, listening until I was sure he was gone. Then I called 911 anyway. When the officers arrived 20 minutes later, Mark was nowhere to be found. They took our statements, promised to increase patrols in the area, and advised Emily to file for a restraining order. She nodded numbly but said nothing. After they left, she broke down completely. "I can't live like this anymore," she sobbed. "I can't sleep. I can't breathe. Every time I hear a sound, I think he's there." I held her close, my own chest aching. "You won't have to. I'll take care of it." But even as I said it, I didn't know what "it" meant. The following morning, I went out to clear my head. The neighbor, Mr. Collins, was sweeping his porch again. When he saw me, he hesitated, then approached carefully. "I saw the police cars last night," he said quietly. "Did he come back?" I nodded. "He tried to get in." Mr. Collins sighed deeply. "I was afraid of that." "You knew he would, didn't you?" I asked. He looked down, gripping his broom tightly. Men like him don't stop until they're forced to. "Do you know something, Mr. Collins? Something you haven't told me?" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward Emily's window. Then he spoke softly. "I didn't want to interfere before, but the night before you came, I saw something." "What?" I asked sharply. "He wasn't just shouting," he said. "He was carrying something out of the apartment. A bag. Heavy. I thought it was his clothes, but then I saw her laptop sticking out. He took it with him." "Her laptop?" He nodded grimly. "And something else, a small box." She was crying, begging him to give it back. I heard him say, "You don't deserve this after what you did." Then he left. "What she did?" I echoed. "I don't know what he meant," Mr. Collins said. But whatever it was, it scared her. Badly. That afternoon, I asked Emily about it. She looked startled. "You talked to Mr. Collins?" "He told me Mark took your laptop." "Why didn't you tell me?" She hesitated. "Because it wasn't just the laptop. It was everything: my bank cards, my savings, my documents. He cleaned me out. I have nothing left. My blood boiled. He stole from you." She nodded weakly. I tried to stop him, but he said it was his right, that since I was his wife, it was all his. "That's not how it works," I said firmly. "You're filing charges today." She shook her head. "It's no use. He'll twist everything. He always does. He makes people believe he's the victim. Then we'll find proof," I said. "Something he can't deny." It wasn't until later that night, the night of truth, that proof came looking for us. It started with a knock. But this time, it wasn't Mark. It was Mr. Collins. He looked pale, breathless. "You need to come downstairs," he said urgently. "Now." My heart lurched. I followed him down, Emily trailing behind. Outside, near the dumpster behind the building, stood a police officer and 2 paramedics. "What's going on?" I demanded. Mr. Collins pointed silently toward the alleyway. A man lay there unconscious, bruised, his jacket torn. "Mark." For a moment, I couldn't even process it. He was breathing, but barely. The officer said someone had found him collapsed near the parking lot, his car doors open, his phone smashed beside him. Emily stood frozen, her face unreadable. "He did this to himself?" I whispered. The officer shook his head. "Looks like a struggle. We're investigating." They lifted him onto a stretcher. As they carried him away, his hand slipped from the blanket, revealing deep scratches on his arm, defensive wounds. Emily stared at them for a long time, then whispered, "He came here last night. He tried to get in. What if—" I looked at her sharply. "Emily, did he get inside?" Her lips trembled. "I don't remember. I locked the door after you went to sleep. But I thought I heard something." "Something?" "Like someone moving in the kitchen," she said softly. But when I looked, there was nothing. We stood there, silent, as the ambulance drove away. That night she couldn't stop shaking. "What if they think I did something?" "You didn't," I said firmly. "You defended yourself. Whatever happened, you're safe now." But I wasn't sure either of us believed that. Because deep down, I knew the truth wasn't over. There were still questions. Too many. How had Mark ended up outside, beaten and broken? Who else had been there? And what exactly had he found before it all went wrong? As I sat by the window that night, watching the empty street where the black car had once been, I realized something that chilled me to my core. This wasn't the end of the danger. It was only the beginning of the truth. It was 2 nights later when the world around us finally cracked open. Emily had been quieter since the night Mark was taken away in the ambulance. She spoke little, moved carefully, and jumped at every small sound. The police had come by once to ask a few questions, but their tone suggested more suspicion than sympathy. I spent most of my time in her apartment pretending to read while I watched over her. Every tick of the clock felt like it was counting down to something neither of us could name. Then came the knock. It wasn't a soft or hesitant knock, this time it was sharp, quick, and deliberate. The kind of knock that demanded attention. I opened the door a few inches and froze. It was the neighbor, Mr. Collins. His usually calm face was pale, and there was a nervous tremor in his voice when he spoke. "Stop! Don't go outside," he said immediately, eyes darting toward the hallway. "What's wrong?" I asked, confused. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I saw someone. Downstairs. He was standing near the laundry room. "Watching your door." Emily had come up behind me by then, clutching her blanket around her shoulders. "Who was it?" she whispered. Mr. Collins shook his head. "I didn't get a good look. He was wearing a cap, hood pulled low. But I'm sure of one thing, he's been here before." My chest tightened. "You mean, I think it's him," Mr. Collins interrupted quietly. "Mark." That single name made the air heavy. Emily gasped, stepping back instinctively. "But he's in the hospital," I said, though even as I said it, doubt crept in. The police had never confirmed whether he'd been admitted or just checked and released. Mr. Collins swallowed. "I thought so too. But he was moving fine from what I saw. And he had something in his hand, a phone, or maybe a camera. I think he's been watching you." I immediately shut and bolted the door, checking the locks twice. Emily started pacing, her voice trembling. "He's playing with us, Dad. He wants to scare me. He knows I won't sleep, won't the loves that." I put my hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. He can't hurt you if we stay alert. I'll call the police again." But before I could reach for my phone, Mr. Collins spoke again, his voice hesitant, as if wrestling with something. "There's something else you should know," he said. Emily and I turned toward him. "That night when he was taken away," Mr. Collins continued, "I followed the ambulance to the corner of the street. I wanted to make sure he was gone. But as they loaded him in, he said something strange." My pulse quickened. "What did he say?" Mr. Collins looked directly at Emily. "He said, she doesn't know what I know, but she will." Emily went still. The color drained from her face. "He said that?" Mr. Collins nodded gravely. Emily backed away, shaking her head. No, it can't be." "Emily," I said gently, "what does he mean?" "What don't you know?" She sank onto the couch, clutching her head. "I don't know. Unless—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. "Unless what?" I pressed. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and wet. "Dad." When Mark and I first got married, he made me sign papers said they were for our joint savings account, for safety. But I never saw them again. I thought nothing of it. What if those weren't just bank documents? "You think he forged something?" I asked. She nodded. "He's been saying for months that the apartment is his, that everything here belongs to him. What if he meant it literally?" Mr. Collins exhaled shakily. "If that's true, you need to check immediately. He could have transferred things under his name." Emily jumped up and rushed to her bedroom, rummaging through drawers until she found a small folder. She opened it, flipping through receipts, old letters, and contracts until she stopped dead. Her hands began to shake. "Dad," she whispered, handing me a paper. I looked down and felt my stomach drop. It was a property document, but instead of her name, it listed Mark Thompson as the owner. The date was from a year ago. The signature, hers, was scrawled at the bottom. Only it wasn't hers. It was forged. I felt a surge of cold rage. That snake. He's been planning this all along. Emily sank into the chair, sobbing. He's trying to take everything. He said he'd ruin me, and I didn't believe him. Mr. Collins placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's not too late. We can fix this. But you have to act fast. Go to the police with this." I nodded in agreement. "We'll go first thing in the morning." But fate didn't wait for morning. At around midnight, I woke up to a noise, a faint creak near the kitchen. At first, I thought it was just the pipes. Then came another sound, soft footsteps. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a metal lamp, and crept out of the bedroom. The lights were off, the apartment drenched in moonlight. As I turned the corner into the living room, I froze. The front door was slightly open, and standing there, half-shadowed by the hallway light, was Mark. He looked nothing like the man I'd last seen. His face was thinner, pale, his eyes sunken and wild. His jacket was torn and his hands trembled slightly. "Mark," I said, my voice low and cold. "Get out." He smiled faintly, a broken, twisted smile. "You shouldn't have gotten involved, old man." Emily appeared behind me, gasping. "Mark!" He turned toward her, his eyes softening for a moment before darkening again. "You lied to me, Emily. You think you can hide what's mine?" "Yours," I snapped. "You stole from her." He took a step forward. "I earned it. Every bit of it. I put up with her, didn't I? Her moods, her nagging, her pitying looks. You both think you're better than me." I raised the lamp higher. "You need to leave. Now." But before I could move, Mr. Collins' voice thundered from behind us, sharp and commanding. "Stop!" We all turned. He stood in the doorway, holding a flashlight, his phone already in his other hand. "Police are on their way," he said firmly. "Step back, Mark." Mark froze, his jaw clenching. "You called them?" "Yes," Mr. Collins said. "And this time, they'll see who you really are." For a long moment, no one moved. The room was filled with nothing but heavy breathing and the low hum of tension. Then, slowly, Mark dropped his gaze. He took one step back, then another. "I just wanted what's mine," he murmured. "But you'll all see. You'll all see what she did." And with that, he turned and walked out, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall. I locked the door behind him, my hands trembling. Minutes later, the police arrived, but by then, Mark was gone again, vanished into the night. Emily collapsed into tears, and Mr. Collins gently guided her to the couch. "It's over for now," he said softly. "He won't get far." But even as he said it, his expression was grave. He knew, as I did, that this wasn't truly over. Because Mark's last words lingered like poison in the air. "You'll all see what she did." And that meant there was still one more secret buried in this nightmare, one that hadn't yet come to light. The days after that night passed in a blur of sleeplessness and dread. Emily tried to act normal. She cooked, cleaned, even returned to work part-time, but her eyes told a different story. They were constantly scanning, always expecting him to reappear. Mr. Collins checked on us every morning and evening. He was calm, dependable, and quietly protective, like a wall between us and the chaos that had swallowed Emily's life. I appreciated him more than I could say, but even his presence couldn't erase the unease. Then, one afternoon, everything shifted again. Emily was at work and I was sitting on the balcony trying to read when I noticed an envelope slipped under the front door. No knock, no sound, just that plain, white envelope. I froze, my heart thudding. I walked over slowly, half expecting it to be another legal notice or maybe something from the police. But when I picked it up, I saw the handwriting neat, deliberate, familiar. It was Mark's. I hesitated for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No threats, no rage this time, just a short, cryptic line. "You raised her better than this. Ask her about the night she came home crying." That was it. No signature, no return address. I read it again, confusion knotting my stomach. What did he mean? What night? Emily had been through plenty, but crying? Was he talking about something I didn't know? When Emily came home that evening, I didn't bring it up immediately. She looked exhausted, and the circles under her eyes had deepened. But after dinner, I handed her the note. She stared at it for several seconds, silent. Then, slowly, her hands began to shake. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was under the door when I got home," I said. "What's he talking about, Emily?" She didn't answer right away. She sat down, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Dad, there's something I never told you. Something that happened before the marriage fell apart." I leaned forward, uneasy. "What is it?" Her voice came out in a whisper. "Mark didn't start out cruel. He started out charming, kind. He said all the right things. But when we moved in together, he began to change. He'd say little things about how I wasn't enough, how I should be grateful he was with me. It was slow, quiet, like he was rewriting my life in small pieces. I clenched my jaw. "You should have told me sooner." "I was ashamed," she said, eyes wet. "I thought I could fix it. But then one night, I came home crying. That's the night he's talking about." Her voice broke. "He had my phone. Said he'd seen messages between me and an old friend from college, a guy named Liam. Just innocent messages about work. But Mark twisted it, said I was betraying him. He locked me out of the apartment. I sat in the hallway, crying, until morning. I felt my chest tighten painfully. "You slept outside your own home?" She nodded. "I didn't tell anyone. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. But he used that night against me for years. He said it proved I couldn't be trusted." Mr. Collins, who had come by and quietly taken a seat across from us, spoke softly. "That's emotional abuse, Emily. Classic control tactic. He was breaking you down so you'd never leave." Emily wiped her tears. "And it worked. For a while." I looked down at the note again. "So this is what he's hinting at, that somehow you were the unfaithful one, that he's the victim." She nodded bitterly. "He's trying to rewrite the story, make me look guilty. But I swear, Dad, I never—" "I know," I said immediately, my voice steady. "You don't have to defend yourself to me." For the first time that evening, she let out a shaky breath, relief mixing with exhaustion. But the quiet didn't last long. The very next morning, there was another letter, this time delivered by mail. It was addressed to both of us. Inside was a printed document, a photocopy of an email thread. It was between Emily and someone named Liam. Friendly, casual, but Mark had highlighted specific lines in bright yellow. "You always understood me better than anyone. I wish things were simpler." He'd also attached a handwritten note at the bottom. "Still think she's innocent?" I could feel my hands shaking with anger as I read it. This is manipulation. He's twisting simple words into something ugly. Emily looked sick. "He's trying to destroy me, Dad, piece by piece." Mr. Collins stepped in again. "This is harassment. You need to take this to the police, especially since he's already been caught lurking here." We did. We filed another report. But as expected, the officer only nodded and said they'd look into it. That night, as Emily sat by the window staring out at the streetlights, she said quietly, "He'll never stop, will he?" I wanted to say yes, that we'd win, that it would all end soon, but I didn't. Because deep down, I knew people like Mark didn't just vanish. They waited, they plotted, and the worst part, they believed they were the victim. A few days later, I decided to confront him myself. I didn't tell Emily, I just needed answers. Closure. I drove to his old workplace, a construction company on the edge of town. The manager said Mark hadn't shown up in weeks. But as I turned to leave, someone in the back called out, "Hey, are you talking about Mark Thompson?" "Yes," I said. "Do you know where I can find him?" The man nodded. "He's been hanging around the old Ridge apartments downtown. He said he's staying with a friend there." It was an area I wouldn't normally go near, half-abandoned buildings, flickering streetlights, stray dogs in the alleys. But I went anyway. When I found the building, it looked as tired as the neighborhood: cracked paint, broken windows, trash in the hallways. I climbed to the second floor, heart pounding, and knocked. For a long time, there was silence. Then, a shuffling sound. The door creaked open, and there he was. Mark. He looked even worse than before, unshaven, gaunt, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. He smirked faintly when he saw me. Well, well, the protective father. "I came to tell you to stop," I said firmly. "Leave her alone. You've done enough damage." He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think she's so innocent?" "I know she's your victim," I said coldly. He stepped closer, his expression tightening. "You don't know half the story. She's not who you think she is." What are you talking about? He tilted his head slightly. Ask her where she got the money for your wife's medical bills. Ask her what she promised to do for it. I froze. What are you implying? He just smiled a cruel, knowing smile. She never told you, did she? Of course not. She wanted to protect her image, the good daughter, the one who sacrificed everything for Daddy. My fists clenched, but I held my ground. You're lying. Am I? He said softly. You should have seen her face when I found out. The guilt, the fear. She's not innocent, old man. She's just better at hiding her sins. Before I could say another word, he slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a long time, the sound of that door echoing in my chest. His words felt like poison, not because I believed them, but because a small, horrible doubt had begun to stir. Could there be something Emily hadn't told me? When I got home that night, she was asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket. Her face looked peaceful, almost childlike, but also tired beyond her years. I sat beside her and watched her breathe, my thoughts churning. Maybe Mark was lying, he probably was. But his words had struck too close to something I'd always felt, but never said, that Emily had carried more weight than any daughter should, that she'd hidden her pain too well. The next morning, I confronted her. Emily, I said quietly, handing her a cup of tea, I need to ask you something. Please be honest. She looked up, wary. What is it? Your mother's treatment, I said slowly. How did you pay for it? Back then I was out of work for months and the bills were… She looked down, her hands tightening around the cup. I used the insurance money, she said quickly. Emily, I said, my voice firmer. There wasn't enough insurance money. I saw the final bill. It was double what the insurance covered. She hesitated. Dad, please. Tell me the truth, I said. Tears welled up in her eyes. I borrowed it from Mark, she whispered, before we got married. He said it was a gift, that he wanted to help. I sat back, stunned. So that's what he's using now, I murmured. That's what he meant. He thinks you owe him. She nodded miserably. Yes, and he never lets me forget it. He says I used him, that I only married him because of that money. I rubbed my face, torn between anger and heartbreak. Emily, you saved your mother's life. You did what you had to do. She nodded slowly, but her tears kept falling. He said one day I'd pay him back. I didn't think he meant like this. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low and deep, like the sound of something inevitable approaching. And as I looked at her trembling hands, I realized that this wasn't just a story of betrayal anymore. It was a story of debt, emotional, moral, and painfully human, and now it was coming due. The next morning, the world felt strangely quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. Emily hadn't slept much. I could tell by the dark smudges under her eyes and the way she moved, like every step carried the weight of a secret. I wanted to press her, to drag whatever truth she was hiding into the light, but I held back. She needed to come to me when she was ready. Still, the silence between us felt heavy, like an unspoken storm. I tried to distract myself with small chores, watering the plants, sweeping the balcony, making breakfast, but every sound felt sharp, unnatural. Even the clink of the spoon against the mug made me flinch. It was around noon when Emily finally spoke. She was sitting by the window staring outside, her hands twisting a tissue into shreds. "Dad," she said softly, not turning around. "Can we talk?" I put down the dish I was washing and dried my hands. "Of course." She motioned toward the couch and I sat down across from her. Her eyes looked distant, tired, defeated, but there was something else too. Something I hadn't seen in weeks. Resolve. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, "about Mark, about everything that's happened, and about what he said to you." Her voice trembled slightly. I nodded, staying quiet. "He's not lying entirely," she whispered. "At least, not about everything." My stomach tightened. "Emily, what do you mean?" She swallowed hard, tears already brimming. When Mom got sick, I panicked. I didn't know how we'd pay the bills. You'd already lost your job, and I was barely making enough to cover rent. I tried every option: loans, credit cards, even selling some of Mom's jewelry, but it wasn't enough. She paused, wiping her eyes. And then Mark offered to help. I remembered how charming he'd been back then, generous, polite, almost too perfect. You said he offered it as a gift. She nodded miserably. That's what he told me. He said he didn't want anything in return, that he just wanted to help because he loved me. But after the surgery, after Mom started recovering, he changed. Her breath hitched. He started hinting that I owed him, that I should show my gratitude. I thought he meant marriage, and I was desperate, Dad. I thought maybe if I said yes, if I built a life with him, it would make everything right. My chest ached. So you married him out of guilt? She shook her head. Not entirely. I thought I could grow to love him. He was kind at first, and I told myself maybe that was enough. But once we were married, the kindness disappeared. He reminded me constantly that he'd paid for Mom's life. Every argument ended with the same words, "You'd be nothing without me." Her hands were trembling now, and I reached across the table, placing mine over hers. You don't have to carry that shame, Emily. You were trying to save your mother. Tears streamed down her cheeks. It got worse, Dad. He started controlling everything: my phone, my friends, my job. And when I tried to stand up to him, he'd bring up that debt again. He'd say, "You owe me. Don't forget what I did for your family." I could feel anger rising in me, hot, sharp, protective. That man doesn't understand love. He only knows power. She nodded weakly. I wanted to leave him so many times, but I was scared. I didn't want to disappoint you or Mom. I thought if I just endured it a little longer, maybe he'd change. But he didn't, I said quietly. No, she whispered. He got worse. He started recording our arguments, twisting my words to make me sound unstable. He'd hide my things, then accuse me of losing them. He even told his friends that I was cheating on him. I felt my fists clench. He's a manipulator, Emily, a coward hiding behind lies. She looked at me, her eyes red. I tried to protect you from it. I didn't want you to know how bad it was. When you came to visit, I'd clean the bruises with makeup. I'd smile and cook and act like everything was fine. But the moment you left, he'd start again. He said you were meddling, that you wanted to turn me against him. I felt my throat tighten. Why didn't you tell me? Because he made me believe it was my fault, she said, voice breaking. He said I was too emotional, too dependent, that no one would believe me. And for a long time, I believed him. The room was quiet except for her quiet sobs. I sat there, stunned by the sheer depth of her pain, the years of quiet suffering she'd buried under forced smiles. Finally, I spoke. You're not weak, Emily. You were surviving. And now you're healing. She nodded, but her gaze dropped. There's one more thing you should know. My heart skipped. What is it? That night when Mr. Collins stopped you from opening the door, he wasn't just protecting us from Mark. He was protecting me from myself. I stared at her, confused. I'd been messaging Mark, she admitted. After the last letter he sent, I told him to stop. But he said he wanted to apologize, to meet one last time. I didn't tell anyone because I thought maybe if I heard him out, he'd finally let go. My pulse quickened. Emily, why would you do that? Because I wanted peace, she said softly. I was tired of living in fear, but when I went to meet him, he wasn't there. Instead, there was a man waiting outside the cafe, someone I didn't know. He said Mark had sent him. He tried to make me get into a car. My blood ran cold. What? She nodded shakily. I ran, Dad. I ran until my legs gave out. I came home crying, and that's when Mr. Collins saw me. He must have realized something was wrong. He stayed outside that night just in case. He didn't tell you because I begged him not to. I was scared you'd go after Mark yourself. I sat back, stunned and horrified. He tried to have you taken. Yes, she whispered. I think so. I don't know what he was planning, but I'm sure it wasn't good. After that, I blocked every number he used. But the letters, the notes, they kept coming. I think he's watching from somewhere. My hands trembled with rage, but I forced my voice to stay calm. He's gone too far. We're going to end this, Emily, I promise you. She looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. How? I glanced toward the window, where the world outside looked deceptively peaceful, the sunlight cutting through the curtains, the faint sound of children playing down the street. By showing him that we're not afraid anymore. And by making sure the law finally does what it should have done months ago. Mr. Collins came by later that evening. When Emily told him everything, he sat quietly for a long time. Then he said, "It's time to bring this into the open. I have friends in the police department, people who actually care about these cases. We'll make them listen." He helped us draft a formal complaint, complete with all the letters, recordings, and messages Emily had saved. He even included his own testimony about that night at the door. For the first time in months, Emily looked lighter. Not happy, not yet, but like a woman who could finally breathe. That night, as she went to bed, she stopped by the doorway and said quietly, "Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me." I smiled faintly. There's nothing in this world that could make me do that. When she closed her bedroom door, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the shadows on the wall. Every heartbeat echoed with one thought that the worst was not behind us yet. Because men like Mark didn't disappear quietly. And sure enough, just as I was drifting off to sleep, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "You think you can take her away from me? You have no idea what she's done." The screen flickered in my trembling hand. I turned off the phone and sat there in silence, the darkness pressing around me. Emily had confessed her pain, her shame, her truth. But now, it was my turn as her father to face mine. Because I realized something that night. This battle wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about redemption, hers and mine. And the only way to win was to finally drag the monster out of the shadows, no matter what it cost. ChatGPT said, "The next few days passed in a haze of tension. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't tell Emily about the text message. She was already carrying enough pain I couldn't add to it. But inside, something dark and heavy had begun to grow. The police had taken our report. They promised to look into it. I'd heard that tone before, polite, procedural, but hollow. I'd seen the way they glanced at each other when Emily told them about the letters. How one of them scribbled a note with the kind of indifference that said they'd already moved on in their minds. Mr. Collins tried to reassure me. "Give it time," he said. "Sometimes justice moves slower than we want it to." But deep down, I knew justice doesn't move on its own. You have to push it. Sometimes you have to drag it kicking and screaming into the light. That night, Emily stayed at a friend's place. She said she wanted space, and I agreed. She needed peace. But as I sat alone in the living room, something didn't sit right. The air felt heavy. The silence stretched too long, too deep. Then, at around midnight, the doorbell rang. A chill ran through me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mr. Collins never came this late. I hesitated before peeking through the peephole, but whoever was outside had covered it with their finger. My heart thudded. I stepped back quietly, my mind racing. Then, through the door, came a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Open up, old man. We need to talk. Mark." For a second, I froze, torn between anger and fear. My first instinct was to yell, to tell him to get lost. But then I remembered Emily's words. "He won't stop until you show him you're not afraid." I steadied my breathing. "There's nothing to talk about, Mark. Leave before I call the police." He chuckled, the sound low and mocking. "The police? You really think they care about you? About your sad little story?" The words sliced through the door like knives. Then came the sound of a hand slapping the wood. "You think you can hide her from me forever? She's mine, and she knows it." My blood boiled. "She's not yours. She never was. You used her pain to control her. But it's over now." There was silence, then a single knock, slow and deliberate. "You don't know what she's done," he said finally. "You think she's innocent? You should have heard what she told me before you showed up. How she really feels about you." I clenched my jaw, refusing to answer. But his next words made my knees go weak. "She said she blames you for everything, for her mother's death, for her misery, for being trapped with me. She said she wishes you'd never come back." The world spun. I told myself he was lying, that it was just another manipulation. But part of me hesitated, because somewhere deep inside, I'd feared the same thing. After all, I hadn't always been the perfect father. When her mother got sick, I withdrew into work, into silence. I thought I was being strong, but Emily had needed comfort, not distance. And when I finally tried to reconnect, she was already building her walls. Mark must have seen that weakness, that distance, and slipped right in. He knew exactly where to strike. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. "You're wasting your time, Mark. Leave now, before I make sure you never come near her again." He laughed a cruel, hollow sound. Then footsteps retreated down the porch. I waited for the sound of a car engine, but there was nothing. Just the hum of the streetlights outside. When I finally opened the door, he was gone. Only a folded piece of paper lay on the doormat. It read, "She lied to you once. She'll do it again." I crumpled the note in my fist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he'd said. I wanted to believe Emily, to believe her confession had been the whole truth, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow. The next morning, Emily returned home. She looked better, calmer. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "Hey, Dad." "Hey," I said softly. "How was your night?" "It was nice," she said. "Peaceful." "I needed it." I nodded. I wanted to tell her about Mark showing up, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think to be sure of what was real and what was another one of his traps. Later that afternoon, Mr. Collins stopped by. He brought news the police had identified the car linked to Mark's fake letter drops. "It's registered to one of his business associates," he said grimly. "We're close." Emily thanked him, relief in her voice. But I noticed the way she looked away when he mentioned Mark's name. Guilt flickered across her face, quick but unmistakable. And that was when my fear turned into suspicion. That evening, after Emily went to her room, I checked her phone, something I had promised myself I would never do. I hated the idea. It felt wrong, invasive, but something told me there was more to this story. And I was right. There were deleted messages, but I knew how to check the backups. And there they were. Threads of conversations with an unknown number, all recent. Unknown. "I miss you. You know, I was only trying to protect you." "Emily, please stop. This isn't helping." Unknown. "You'll see. He's not who you think he is." "Emily, leave my father out of this." Unknown. Too late. My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if she was responding out of fear or something else, but the fact that she was replying at all made my chest tighten with betrayal. The next morning I confronted her. "Emily," I said, my voice calm but firm, "when was the last time you talked to Mark?" She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "What? You heard me." She hesitated. "A few days ago, he texted me. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd worry." "So you did respond?" She looked down. "Only to tell him to stop." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Emily, this man is dangerous. You can't keep any contact with him, not even one word." "I know, Dad," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I just thought maybe if I gave him closure, he'd finally move on." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her tone, the way her voice cracked, the way her eyes darted away, made my heart ache. That night, as I sat in the dark, I realized something painful. The betrayal that had shattered my trust wasn't just Mark's manipulation, it was the slow erosion of truth between me and my daughter. It wasn't about lies spoken aloud. It was about the silence, the things we didn't say, the truths we avoided. I thought back to all the times I'd brushed off her worries, told her to be strong, when she'd needed me to just listen. Maybe she'd learned to hide her pain from me because I'd taught her that vulnerability was weakness. That realization broke me. But as much as it hurt, it also gave me clarity. This wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a story of broken people trying to survive the aftermath. Emily wasn't my enemy, she was another victim of Mark's poison. And maybe, in trying to protect her, I'd forgotten that healing doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. So the next morning I sat her down. "Emily," I said softly, "I need to know something. Are you still afraid of him?" She looked up, startled by my tone. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes, but not in the same way. I'm afraid of what he might do to you." Her words hit me like a wave. All this time, I'd been fighting to protect her, but she'd been doing the same in her own quiet way. I reached out and took her hand. Then we faced him together. "No more secrets." Tears welled in her eyes. "No more secrets," she whispered. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not completely. But it was something close. Because even in betrayal, there was love. And sometimes love, bruised, battered, imperfect, is what carries you back to the truth. And that truth was simple. I'd lost faith for a moment, but not forever. The man who had tried to destroy our family was still out there. But this time we weren't broken anymore. We were ready. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, the house wrapped in silence. The ticking of the old wall clock was the only sound breaking through the still air. Each tick seemed to echo my thoughts sharp, deliberate, steady. I had reached a point where every father's fear turns into resolve. I realized something that night. Protecting Emily didn't just mean keeping her safe. It meant freeing her from the shadow that had taken over her life. Mark had to be stopped not through anger, but through truth. I stood up and walked toward my study where I had kept every letter, every photo, and every shred of evidence against him. Each piece was a story of manipulation, not just of Emily, but of everyone he'd touched. Business partners, old friends, even his ex-wife, all had been burned by the same charming, deceitful man. It was time to turn those stories into justice. I called Mr. Collins first. He answered immediately, his voice groggy but alert. "Everything all right, Richard?" "No," I said firmly. "But it will be. I'm done hiding. I want to bring him down legally, publicly, and permanently." He was silent for a moment, then said, "If you're sure, I'll help. But once this starts, there's no turning back." "I've already turned my back once," I said quietly. "Never again." That night, I stayed up making copies of everything: the letters, the texts, the photographs. I wrote down every incident Emily had shared with me, every threat, every manipulation, every scar he had left behind. I was building a wall of truth, brick by brick. When the first light of dawn touched the window, I felt a calm I hadn't known in months. The decision had been made. I walked to Emily's room and knocked gently. "Em, you awake?" She opened the door, her eyes puffy but peaceful. "Barely," she said with a weak smile. "I'm meeting with Mr. Collins today," I said. "We're taking this to court. I want your statement, your side of the story. But only if you're ready." Her face stiffened for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'm ready, Dad. I don't want to be afraid anymore." I smiled faintly. "Neither do I." We spent the next few hours together, father and daughter, piecing together fragments of a broken past. For every painful memory, there was a promise of healing. For every tear, there was strength hidden underneath. At one point, Emily looked at me and said, "Do you think he'll ever stop, Dad? Even if we win?" I thought about it before answering. Men like him don't stop because of fear. They stop because the truth leaves them nowhere to hide. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Then let's show him the truth." Later that day, we met with Mr. Collins at his office. The man looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from chasing justice for too long. But when he saw the folder I placed on his desk, his eyes widened. "This is a lot," he murmured. "It's everything," I said. "I want to make sure no one else goes through what Emily did. He needs to answer for all of it." Mr. Collins leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment. "You're not the same man who walked into my office months ago," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "That man wanted revenge. This one wants peace." He smiled faintly and nodded. "Then let's get you both that peace." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, calls, and court documents. Emily stayed strong through every step, though I could still see the tremor in her hands when she had to read old messages aloud. One evening, after another long day, she sat beside me on the porch and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Her words caught me off guard. I turned to her, surprised. "Proud of me?" She nodded. "You could have walked away. You could have given up. But you didn't." I smiled, my throat tightening. "You're the reason I didn't. I'm your father, Emily. It's my job to stand when you can't." She rested her head on my shoulder. For the first time in a long while, it felt like home again. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Mark hadn't shown his face since that night, but I could feel his presence like a storm building just over the horizon. The next morning, Mr. Collins called. "Richard," he said, "the police issued a warrant for Mark's arrest. We've got enough evidence to move forward." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I said. When I hung up, Emily came out of her room. "Was that Mr. Collins?" she asked. I nodded. "It's done." She blinked, uncertain. "Done?" "Yes," I said softly. "It's over, Emily. You're free now." For a long moment, she just stood there, and then tears filled her eyes. But they weren't tears of fear this time. They were tears of relief. She hugged me tight. "Thank you, Dad." I closed my eyes, holding her close. "No," I whispered, "thank you for giving me a reason to fight again." That night, as the wind whispered outside and the world finally seemed at peace, I sat by the window with a quiet smile. I wasn't the same man who had walked into that nightmare months ago. I was a father who had made mistakes, but I was also a father who had learned, fought, and found his way back to love. And for the first time in years, I felt proud not because I'd won something, but because I hadn't let pain define who we were anymore. The next day would bring more paperwork, more meetings, more healing. But tonight was for peace, because after everything I'd finally learned, a father's decision isn't about control. It's about courage, the courage to stand, forgive, and fight for what truly matters. And that courage had brought me back home. After everything that happened, the betrayal, the shouting, the night when the truth ripped my heart open, the house that once echoed with laughter now stood in silence. Days passed like shadows. I barely spoke. I barely ate. I would sit by the window, watching the street, waiting for something. Though I didn't know what. My daughter, Alina, hadn't called in weeks. After her confession, after she broke down in tears, saying she did everything out of fear and desperation, I couldn't bring myself to face her. The image of her, trembling, crying, clutching my hands and begging me to forgive her, played again and again in my mind. And yet, her words echoed louder than her tears. "Dad, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't want you to control my life anymore." Those words tore me apart. Not because of what she said, but because I realized I had been controlling. In trying to protect her, I had built a cage around her. A golden cage, yes, but still a cage. I thought giving her everything, money, security, a home, would keep her safe. I never imagined it would make her feel trapped. So I stayed away. Not out of pride, but out of pain. I wanted her to understand what distance felt like, what absence meant, and maybe what a father's silence could say louder than words ever could. One morning, the neighbor, Mr. Carter, the same man who had stopped me that night and revealed the truth, knocked on my door again. "Robert," he said softly, his eyes kind but firm. "You can't keep sitting in the dark like this. Go see her." I looked at him silent. He sighed. "You know, she's been coming to your gate every day. She just stands there for a few minutes, then leaves. Maybe she's waiting for you to come out first." My throat tightened. She comes here?" He nodded. "Every evening, around 5. I see her from my porch." Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was guilt, maybe longing. But suddenly, I felt the weight of all those silent days crushing me. That evening, I waited. At exactly 5, I saw her, standing outside the gate, wearing a pale blue coat, her hair tied back, holding something small in her hands. She didn't see me at first. She just stood there, staring at the gate, her lips moving slightly, maybe whispering to herself. Then, as if sensing my presence, she looked up. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she opened the gate slowly and stepped inside. "Dad," she whispered. It wasn't the word itself, it was how she said it. Fragile, hesitant, afraid it might break if she said it too loud. I swallowed hard. "What are you doing here, Alina?" She took a deep breath. I couldn't stay away anymore. She stepped closer, and I could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I've been trying to write you a letter every night. But every time I start, I don't know what to say. I ruined everything. I hurt you. I hurt myself. I wanted to stay strong, to keep my voice calm, but the pain in her eyes broke me." "Why, Alina?" I asked quietly. "Why didn't you just tell me? Why lie? Why let me walk into that house thinking you were living happily?" She looked down. "Because I didn't want you to see me fail." I frowned. "Fail?" She nodded, tears falling now. "You always saw me as strong, capable, the one who would never make mistakes. But when my husband started changing, when the fights began, when money got tight, I didn't want you to see the mess I'd made of my life. I was ashamed. I thought if you knew, you'd stop trusting me. Or worse, pity me." Her words hit like thunder. Pity. That was her fear. And maybe she was right. Maybe I would have pitied her. Maybe, without realizing it, I'd made her feel small under the weight of my expectations. She reached into her bag and took out a small envelope. "I've been saving this," she said softly. "It's a check from my new job. I know it's not much, but I wanted to help pay back the money I owe you." I looked at the envelope, thin, folded, trembling in her hands, and something inside me cracked wide open. "All I ever wanted," I said, voice shaking, "was your happiness. Not your money, not repayment, just honesty." She started crying. Hard. "I know, Dad, and I took that for granted. I lied. I pushed you away. But that night, when Mr. Carter stopped you and I saw the look on your face, I realized how much I'd hurt you. I realized I wasn't protecting myself, I was destroying us." She fell to her knees. "Please, please forgive me." And just like that, all the walls I'd built came down. I knelt too, lifted her up, and pulled her into my arms. There were no words left, just tears. Tears that carried years of misunderstanding, pride, love, and regret. We stood there for a long time, father and daughter, broken but not lost as the sun dipped low behind us. Over the next few weeks, we started rebuilding what had been shattered. Not through grand gestures or long talks, but through small, simple moments. She started visiting again, sometimes with a casserole, sometimes just to sit and drink tea in silence. And slowly, laughter found its way back into our conversations. I noticed how her eyes softened when she talked, how her smile seemed more genuine. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden, she said, "I met with a counselor. I'm trying to fix things with Michael, her husband, the man who had treated her coldly, who had been part of the reason our bond had cracked." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you think that's wise?" She sighed. "Maybe not, but I need to try. Not for him, for myself, for peace." I nodded. "Peace is worth fighting for." She smiled faintly. "You taught me that." For the first time in months, I felt proud again. Not of her achievements, not of her choices, but of her courage to face them. Then, one evening, she brought Michael over. I won't lie, the moment I saw him standing on my porch, I felt a surge of anger. Memories flashed his arrogance, his dismissal, the lies. But when he spoke, his voice was different. "Mr. Roberts," he said quietly, "I know you have every reason to hate me. But I came to say, thank you." I frowned. "Thank me?" "For raising Alina, for being the kind of man she looks up to. I've made a lot of mistakes, sir, but she deserves better now, and I'm trying to be that." His humility disarmed me. It didn't erase the past, but it showed growth. And that, I realized, was what mattered most, not perfection, but change. We had dinner that night, the three of us. The conversation was awkward at first, but as the night went on, laughter filled the room again. Not the same as before, but new. Lighter. When they left, Alina hugged me tightly. "You gave me a second chance," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "You gave yourself one." Months passed. Seasons changed. I started gardening again. The roses bloomed brighter than ever. Maybe because the house was filled with peace again. And one day, as I stood watering the plants, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Dad, you missed a spot," she teased. I turned and smiled. "Always watching, aren't you?" She grinned. "Always." We laughed. It was a simple moment. But for me, it was everything. Because it meant we'd made it through anger, through silence, through heartbreak to something stronger than before. Understanding. That night, as I sat by the window, I thought about the journey. The lies, the tears, the truth that came crashing down when the neighbor stopped me that night. It all led to this. Peace. Not the kind that comes easily, but the kind that's earned, piece by piece, through forgiveness. I realized that sometimes the people we love hurt us not because they don't care, but because they're lost. Because they're scared. Because they don't yet understand the value of what they have. And as parents, our hearts are tested not by how much we give, but by how much we can forgive. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by your own, remember, Love is not about never being hurt. It's about choosing to heal even when it hurts. I looked at the photo of my late wife on the shelf and whispered, "We did it, love." She found her way back. The house felt warm again. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled not as a broken father, but as a man who had learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the greatest revenge is forgiveness. The house was quiet again that night, but not lonely. The kind of quiet that feels peaceful, not hollow. The wind moved softly through the curtains, carrying the scent of the rose garden outside. I sat by the window, holding a cup of tea, and watched the moonlight spill across the floor like silver silk. It had been months since everything changed, since the night the truth came out, since the tears, since the silence that followed. And now, looking back, it all felt like a distant storm. The kind that breaks the land only to let new flowers grow. I often think about how fragile we humans are, how easily love can turn into pride, and pride into distance. How silence can grow louder than words. But what I learned through all this was that a father's heart never truly closes. It bends, it breaks, it bleeds, but it never stops loving. When I first found out my daughter had lied to me, when I saw the shame in her eyes, the fear, the walls she built, I thought she'd stopped loving me. I thought I had lost her forever. But I was wrong. She hadn't stopped loving me. She had just forgotten how to show it. And maybe I had too. Because love isn't about control. It isn't about protecting someone so fiercely that you take away their choices. Love, real love, is about trust even when you're afraid of what might happen next. That's what I failed to understand for so long. I thought being a good father meant being strong, making decisions and guiding every step she took. But what it really meant was letting her stumble, letting her fall, and being there when she stood back up. That's the hardest thing about being a parent. You raise them to be independent, and then you have to face the pain of watching them live their life without you. But here's the truth. Sometimes the distance between a parent and child isn't made of miles. It's made of pride. And pride, it's a quiet thief. It steals time. It steals moments. It steals peace. It wasn't until I let go of mine that I found her again. When I forgave her, truly forgave her, I didn't just give her another chance. I gave myself one too. Because forgiveness doesn't only free the person who hurt you, it frees the one who's been hurting inside. As I sat there that night, I could still hear her laughter echoing from the garden earlier that day. The way her eyes sparkled again when she smiled. The way she called me Dad with warmth instead of guilt. It was like life had come full circle. I realized something beautiful then, something every parent learns sooner or later. Our children don't belong to us. They belong to the world. We're only their shelter for a while, their teacher, their guide. But one day, we have to step aside and trust that the love we gave them will be enough to bring them back home when they lose their way. And that's what happened. She found her way back not because I demanded it, but because I waited with love instead of anger. Waiting, that's another kind of love. A quieter one. The kind only a parent truly understands. So, if you're listening to this story, if you're a parent who's been hurt by your own child, or a son or daughter who's drifted away, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Don't let silence win. Don't let pride build walls that love can't climb. Because when the people you love are gone, truly gone, it won't be the fights you remember. It won't be the things they said in anger. It'll be the things you never got to say at all. Pick up the phone. Knock on the door. Say the words that matter while there's still time. Because love, even when broken, is still love. And it deserves a chance to heal. As I watched the stars that night, I whispered a quiet prayer. Not for wealth, not for time, but for gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that taught me patience. Gratitude for the silence that taught me to listen. And gratitude for the love that found its way back even after everything. I smiled to myself. Maybe that's what being a father truly means, not giving life, but giving forgiveness. Not holding on too tightly, but knowing when to let go. And when you finally do, when you finally forgive, not just them but yourself, that's when peace finds you again. The heart that forgives doesn't forget what it lost. It remembers and still loves anyway. That's the moral of my story. That's the moral of a father's heart. If this story touched your heart, remember sometimes forgiveness is the most powerful revenge of all. Because when you choose peace over pain, you don't just heal the past, you change the future. So, my friends, never let pride silence your love. Call the ones you care about. Forgive where you can. And keep your heart open because that's where healing begins. If you believe that love and forgiveness always win in the end, then, like this story, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories of truth, redemption, and the power of family.